Well, hello there everyone. Sekiro Shadows died twice. A game that was released after a decade of dark fantasy RPGs, where From Software finally decided to lay the Dark Souls IP to rest, but instead of reviving Armored Core right away, they chose to make something new. A shinobi game that would take elements from their Souls-likes, but also introduce a new combat system and far increased traversal methods. And would also be their first game to win the Game of the Year award. While this game lacks the variety of the other From Software titles, it has a far more refined combat system, sanded down to perfection, and I want to talk about its boss fights. And yes, we are actually doing Sekiro this time. This isn't going to jump to some April Fool's gag. From Software's Deflect test of the game was an extremely tough challenge for me to overcome. I gotta be honest, I suck at this game. Until it randomly wasn't that hard for the last 30% of the run, but hey, I'm not making a difficulty ranking, I'm making the bosses from worst to best. And by worst to best, I mean least favorite to favorite, because the Headless Ape and his cohort aren't at the bottom of this list. Spoilers. I'm including every boss fight, but I'm also including the Snake, Emma as her own entry, and a few mini-bosses, so let's grapple hook our way into the video with the worst boss in the game, at least by my objectively correct opinion. Number 20, Corrupted Monk. As I said, the Headless Ape duo isn't at the bottom of this list. Why? Well, I'll talk about that fight when we get there in 1 to 2 minutes. Is this boss worse? Probably not, but since I fought her before Genichiro, I made the battle way harder on myself, and it was just frustrating. Could I have come back later? Yeah. Do I care? Not really. She takes barely any damage and her stamina will recover almost immediately. The idea is to get her into a deflect dance and take her down in a single go with Snap Seeds and Long Spark and maybe Fistfuls of Ash and things like that. And you know what? You can easily do it with those upgrades. Or you can just cheese her out to insta-kill her with a jumping death blow. But this was a boss I fought right after Gyobu, so I did not have that level of skill acquired yet, nor did I have the abilities unlocked for it. And ultimately, after trying to burst her down a bit with firecrackers and divine confetti, I just kept baiting out her jumping attacks in hopes she'd run out of HP before I did. Objectively speaking, this fight isn't as bad as some of the upcoming entries, but it was by far the most frustrating fight for me, so it can chill out here at the bottom of the list. And it's honestly not that interesting in general when there's an objectively better version of this boss fight anyways. Alright, let's move on to the apes. Number 19, Headless Ape and his Butt Munch. Look, I said this wasn't my least favorite boss in the game. It's still hot garbage, because this game is not designed for fighting two bosses at once. By the way, dishonorable mention to the two underwater Headless and Fountainhead Palace. If I was counting them, they'd be the worst boss in the game and probably in the Shadow Realm tier. But they're not important for any form of progression, and I already bitched and moaned enough about one boss for this video, and that was against the Corrupted Monk. Anyways, this fight takes a pretty good boss and makes it bad. Phase 1 is okay. You battle the ape in a slightly more cramped cave and worse looking arena that whatever. Phase 2, though, is where the cohort comes out to play, and fighting two bosses at once is just dreadful. However, you can pretty quickly demolish this boss with the Mortal Blade and Firecrackers and get it back to a 1v1, but that just makes the gimmick feel pointless at that point. The first Headless Ape worked because of shock value and also being a sort of terrifying, quite literally in the case of his status effect, burn phase, and your first time seeing what the centipedes can do to a creature to give them their form of immortality. Here, it's just do that burn phase again, but twice, and anytime a burn phase gets dragged out, it loses a lot of the appeal. And honestly, even though I was okay with it, this fight kinda makes me hate the Headless Ape boss theme. It's a very short loop, and not a pleasant one to listen to either. Great for instilling panic in Sunken Valley, but here where the boss is easier than the Snake Eyes fought right before it, not so much. This is objectively the worst major boss in the game, but it gives good rewards for victory, and more importantly, you can very easily stomp it with Mortal Blade and Firecrackers, where I effortlessly won this battle on my first attempt, so it wasn't too frustrating, but I feel sorry for the poor souls that killed Guardian Ape before going for Corrupted Monk. Number 18, Miss Noble. Oh yeah, the ultimate power in the world, the Miss Noble. Really, this boss gets on here to establish the low water mark for boss quality. The fights above it I prefer over nothing at all, but the fights below, I kinda wish would have been cut from the game. Number 17, Lady Butterfly. Often the first major boss I go after, and I wish I could say something nice about the fight against Lady Butterfly. And you know what, I can. She does have some cool attacks, and her music is actually quite nice. Sadly though, that's about where my praise is in. As an optional boss, she actually poses an interesting challenge as you can take her on pretty much whenever you want, even as your first boss in the game, as long as you do it before finishing up Act 2. And her parry dance can be tricky but kinda fun, plus being able to shuriken her off her wires is a neat wrinkle. But Phase 1 isn't really the issue. The issue is Phase 2 has her spawn in a bunch of enemies when the best strategy here is to just run around until she turns them all into a projectile attack. That's a small problem, but more of an annoyance and a time waster. Speaking of small problem though, none of her mechanics, other than the shurikens, really matter. Why? Because her AI gets demolished by just step countering. Quick step, R1, quick step, R1, quick step, R1. Do this ad nauseum, and your victory is basically guaranteed. Normally, I don't include cheese strats for or against a boss fight when they require things like frame perfect inputs or some speedrunning bullshit like, say, luring Gyobu off a cliff. But when it's so easy to perform, I can find it by accident on my first playthrough, I can't not mention it. This isn't some precise strategy or hidden mechanic, it's a basic rhythm that breaks her AI in half, making her drop off the quality cliff as well as any difficulty she may have had. Because I don't find her fun enough to engage with her moveset normally, so you know what? Guess what? It's cheese o'clock. Number 16, the Folding Screen Monkeys. Now, to talk about the game's easiest boss, we're getting down to monkey business. The monkeys represent the ideas of see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil, and I guess the fourth monkey is ascend to a higher plane or something. With the purple monkey having excellent eyesight, the green monkey having an amazing amount of hearing, the orange monkey being a redditor, and the white monkey being the simplest one that I kept alive for gags, or at least I tried to and then I killed him by accident, which kind of ruined the joke. It's a puzzle boss, and like most puzzle bosses, it loses a lot after you know the solution, but I still enjoy the fight for what it is, and it can be fun to try and speed kill the boss. I think this marks the point where the bosses actually are pretty enjoyable going forward, and overall, while I don't think this should have been the final guard to the Mortal Blade, I do think it's kind of interesting having a puzzle to test the player. Though, I kinda wish they could have swapped maybe the Armored Warrior and the Folding Screen Monkeys, but that's neither here nor there. Number 15, Lone Shadow Masanaga the Spear Bearer. Masanaga is a boss that uses the Lone Shadow template, an enemy and mini-boss type I actually really enjoy. However, I'd say Masanaga has the most going for him, since you battle him twice in the game, and he has a history with Wolf instead of just being a dude we murder. The Lone Shadow moveset incorporates both kicks and sword slashes, making a boss where you kinda need to watch his whole body instead of just his blade throughout the fight, especially when his perilous attack has him start throwing hands that can poison you. And his rematch at the Harada Estate throws in a new gimmick that I actually don't mind despite how annoying it feels like it should be. Basically, instead of a posture recovery, if given a chance to breathe, he can summon in dogs to help him in battle, so the best strategy is to keep up the pressure as long as you can with no room to breathe. It just ends up being a Lone Shadow boss fight, but if you back off, it can get a bit messy. So it's an idea of don't let the fight return to neutral, and I kinda like that. I like the idea overall, and I think it's a fun mini-boss, and the fact that you get to fight this specific guy twice gives him a little bit of bonus points. Number 14, the Great Serpent. But the serpent isn't a boss, you I do not care, he gives an achievement for killing it, and it's my video so I can do whatever the hell I want, plus I already included Miss Noble. Anyways, it's a stealth mission against a giant loud scary serpent that would definitely give my mom nightmares. Hell, it's given me the heebie-jeebies as well. But it works as an awesome set piece with you carefully and quietly sneaking around the area in order to not get spotted by the giant serpent, ultimately climaxing in you putting out one of his eyes before making your escape, and possibly shitting yourself in the process before you even get to fight Gyobu. But that's not all for our encounter with this giant foe. Later in the game, after you put the snake's eye out, he'll destroy the bridge and drop you into the lake below, where you have to swim by him to reach the Guardian Ape, though admittedly this encounter is much easier if you've already beaten Corrupted Monk and gained the ability to breathe and swim underwater. Here, the koi fish are probably a bigger threat than the snake is, but it's still a cool set piece nonetheless. Our final encounter against the snake is hidden away after a secret route through Mount Congo where you can put the giant serpent down for good in a badass kill, giving you an achievement for defeating him no less. While it's a glorified level hazard, the feeling of dread this monster creates when in the area is one of the most memorable experiences in Sekiro for me. And no, I'm not including that poison cave encounter here, because that's a different serpent, and I hate the stone statue enemies in there. It's not fun, and it's really not worth it. I'm also not counting the Great Carp either. Number 13, Ishin Ashina. Controversial take is controversial, but to be honest, I don't think this fight has the same impact of making you feel like a monster that Emma does. And I'm gonna be honest here, I hate being evil in video games. I pretty much always play the good guy, or at the very least a neutral good. Anyways, as for the boss fight itself, you actually have to play pretty passive throughout the battle because of how he just gets to auto-dodge some of your slashes and often follow up with a grab, and grabs are my least favorite type of perilous attack in the game by quite a bit, and I think that's a pretty common opinion. His first phase is actually a pretty good warm-up as it builds up to something cool. Then, you know what, we could actually have a pretty awesome final phase on our hands with this boss fight. So it's too bad the second phase is kind of frustrating for me. It's the fire attacks. The fire attacks ruin the battle for me. The big fire pillars are fine, they're a positioning check, but the waves of fire he can shoot out, and they're wide enough that I can't quickstep them to save my life. Skill issue? Probably, but you know what, I'm gonna complain about it. The fire waves are irritating, and Blaze might be my least favorite status in the game because not only does it make your health bar drop faster than the stock market in the late 1920s, but it also stuns you for half a second, leaving you wide open to getting one-tapped by Ishin's follow-up attack. Is there a good boss here? Obviously, and I even like this fight, but my god, if that attack isn't frustrating for me to deal with, and I already don't want to play the Shura route in the first place because I hate playing evil routes in video games. Number 12, Orin of the Water. Genuinely one of the game's best mini-bosses. The dance-like movement, the interesting design, the unique moveset, and the neat little questline. I genuinely think Orin feels more like a major boss than the Corrupted Monk did, and you have to either beat her or run past her to get to Corrupted Monk. The game gives you options on how to handle her, either by speaking with her or ignoring her, but no matter what you do, she'll always aggro and try to attack you, like a Western RPG. And try as you might, you're gonna have to take her out sooner or later. She's a creepy opponent, but a memorable one, and my choice for the second best mini-boss in Sekiro, and one of the two that I think could have been counted as a full-blown boss fight. Not to mention, the boss really does nail the good atmosphere. Number 11, Emma the Gentle Blade. Unlike Ishin, I think this boss does a fantastic job making you feel like a monster, and now you turn your blade against and attempt to kill the woman who has been helping you throughout your entire journey. Emma is a boss who is at her most dangerous when you let the fight return to neutral, so the best way to take her out is to play hyper-aggressive, embodying the monster of Shura that you've become with the sorrowful music as well. And you know what? I think this fight does a great job. Unfortunately, this fight is also one of the shortest in the game, regardless of if you win or lose, since her health is some of the lowest in the game, meaning you can kill her in about a minute, but she can kill you in about 2 seconds. Either way, she stands out as a much more effective bad-ending boss fight than Ishin did, at least in my opinion, and I do really enjoy the fight, even if I also really hate the fight, because I hate playing the Shura route. I don't like being evil, guys. Number 10, Armored Warrior. Out of the game's numerous mini-bosses, the Armored Warrior is by far my favorite of the bunch. Armored Warrior is a gimmick boss not being bothered by the Nippon steel of Kusabi Maru, and how it doesn't break under all the pressure, I'll never really know. But Armored Warrior is a boss that loves to use long windups and quick follow-throughs, and at first it seems like a nightmare to deal with, but you can pretty quickly get the hang of it. The real way to beat this boss is using the strongest force in the Soulsborne universe against him. That's right, we're using gravity. Though, I have to ask, if his son is named Robert, as we're led to believe when he's busy hitting terminal velocity, why is DC Douglas selling his son's firecrackers? Number 9. Great Shinobi Owl. I remember when I originally played this game in 2019, this boss was impossible for me to get the hang of, and was the point where I practically gave up on this game for basically a year before finally beating him in 2020 with the help of the door cheese. So I was really worried fighting this guy for the first time in 5 years, and imagine my surprise when I beat him on my first attempt. Turns out the jumping Mortal Blade breaks this game in half, but this is a weird fight as Owl doesn't use a single perilous attack, but instead he's pulling out the shinobi tools like his own poison, shurikens, and also some firecrackers. And a smoke bomb that breaks your lock-on, and also a mist that turns off your ability to use your healing items. That being said, I still think my one-shot of this fight was a bit of a fluke. It's definitely a boss that takes what you know and flips everything on its head, making for a tough opponent that gets a spot in the amazing tier. And honestly, I like that he does some cowardly tactics too, like begging for his life as a fake out, and you can either fall for it or you can go in for the attack and he will either scorn you or praise you depending on how you act. But yes, even though he's number 9, I still think this is an amazing boss, and I'm sure no one will be mad about any of the remaining placements on this list because they're paying attention to the tiering system. Okay, actually one last thing though, does anyone else think that this boss theme sounds kind of like Pinwheels? Number 8. Gyobu Masataka Oniwa. As the first required boss of the game, Gyobu could be seen as the Father Gascoigne of Sekiro, being the wall you must overcome to see the rest of what this game has to offer, and while fighting a mounted foe can be a tricky prospect, I think Gyobu nails it. All his attacks work well, in a way that feels natural to deflect, and he leaves openings for you to grapple hook onto him to close the distance, and he can be made easier with the use of firecrackers, which will stun him, leaving him open to attack the first few times, but after a bit he'll always go for a counter attack where he slams down his spear on you, but you can still use the firecrackers here and manipulate this counter to your advantage to bait out the downward slam. It does a great job as the first true boss of the game, and while we all know his amazing speech he has whenever you play the game in English, did you know you can actually interrupt him mid-introduction?
Move in haste and die, brat!
Blasphemy, I know. Number 7. Guardian Ape. Ah, good old Guardian Ape. A boss I get my ass beat to for 3 attempts, but then on my 4th attempt I straight up massacred his ass so quickly, only to realize I forgot to hit record as I was delivering the final blow, so I quickly quit out of the game, completely forgetting that unlike the other Souls games, you can actually refight major bosses thanks to the Visions of Strength update. So I had to go and fight him yet again, which took another 4 attempts. Anyways, that matter aside, this boss is actually pretty cool, moving around and acting like a wild beast, being one of the only non-humanoid bosses in the game, but it works well here. I'm not too fond of his grabs, but that's mostly due to me sucking at dodging them more than anything else. As a beast, he is quite weak to firecrackers, and I like how all the trees in the arena provide you grapple points to escape his attacks, but as the fight goes on, more and more the trees will break, making things more perilous. And I also like how if you can keep the pressure up against him, he will actually stun, fall backwards, and will act terrified of you for a bit, because he's not just some random monster, he's a wild animal. And then of course, you cut off his head. Not gonna lie, this is pretty much the only fake out death in a video game that's ever genuinely surprised me, so props to the devs for letting the victory screen play when you cut his head off. Admittedly though, I'm not as big of a fan of the headless ape fight because of how awkward it can be, but I imagine it'll be better with time, as I've only really fought him like twice. And there's still plenty of openings present to hurt the beast in this fight, which is nice, and while the terror screams aren't exactly a hit, I like going to Mibu Village first anyways to ensure I can skip the ape gank, so I always have the purple gourd as an option by the time I get here. Seriously guys, use your status gourds, they go a long way in this game against terror and burn. Not as useful against poison because poison's really not that scary. Number 6. Ishin the Sword Saint. Alright, so I gotta be honest real quick, I actually kinda wish the fight with Genichiro was the game's final boss, and I don't know, I think it would have made for some awesome bookending if they gave him the Owl Father treatment. It's a shame that he's really just a one-phase warm-up that, after your first attempt or two, will get stomped in under 30 seconds. So, how was the fight against the Sword Saint himself, though? Well, it's amazing, I love it. It's only really beaten out by Soul of Cinder and All Mine for me. Though, admittedly, I was a bit let down by how easily I actually beat him on this playthrough. I remember fighting this boss when I first played the game, and it took me well over 80 tries. I considered him the hardest final boss I'd ever faced in a video game. So imagine my surprise and also slight disappointment when I beat him on my third attempt. His first phase honestly just feels like an even easier fight than the Genichiro battle, where he just doesn't do a whole lot, and if you faced off with the Shura version of Ishin, this fight's a breeze. The real spice begins in his second phase when he pulls out the spear and, more importantly, busts out the Glock to rub it in my face that I can only afford a Taurus. This phase is tougher, but honestly, his damage is surprisingly low for a final boss, only hitting me for around 30% or so of my health, which is not a lot for the final boss in a From Software game, but it's weird how everything he did, I just kinda dealt with without much issue. I guess that's honestly a positive, as it means the game as a whole has prepared me well for this fight. But Sekiro has some hard bosses that wrecked my ass 10 plus times, but after getting the Mortal Blade, the difficulty kind of falls off a cliff with the exception of one boss fight we will get to. His final phase is honestly just more of the same. Now you just have lightning coming down, which makes the battle more cinematic, but also a bit easier because you can do lightning deflections against him, though it can also be more chaotic at this point too, if your nerves are getting to you. It's an excellent final boss, and I think it acts as a great cap off to the game, though it's weird how there's 4 endings in this game. 3 of them are behind this one boss fight, and the other one is still behind Ishin. I don't know. Anyways, overall, I think it's an excellent fight. It's just that I enjoyed 5 other bosses more. I don't have any complaints with this battle other than I was surprised by how easily I beat him, but that's not really a fault of the game. In fact, that might actually be good design, showing how well it's prepared me for all the challenges that were coming my way. Number 5, True Corrupted Monk. I'm sure this listing probably pissed somebody off and confused the rest of you, since isn't this fight just Corrupted Monk but with more health? Well, kind of. But given how much further in the game this is, you have far more tools at your disposal as well as abilities, and you can quickly demolish your first phase, and jumping Mortal Blade is a good delete button against most enemies. So it was pretty satisfying getting to just kind of burst down her first phase, which the corrupted form gave me trouble for hours when I fought it. Her second phase is probably the most controversial one, since it seems like you're designed to run around then death blow, but admittedly, I honestly liked parrying the clones. It was a fun little challenge, and unlike False Monk, she has very low posture here, so you can blast through this phase and get to the final one very quickly if you wish. Phase 3 then sees the centipede erupt from her head, showing the monster she's truly become as an infested, and the attacks are now much more aggressive, but it all just kinda works. I can't explain why I love the fight with the true monk, but despise the false version, other than having proper tools at my disposal, which means I can engage her on my own terms instead of playing a 10-minute wait and bait. But overall, it's a fight I find fun. Number 4, Divine Dragon. Despite the ease of this boss fight, I don't think this is actually that controversial of a take. Divine Dragon is one of the easiest main bosses in the entire From Software catalog, but the visuals, the music, and spectacle are all able to make up for it, giving us a boss fight that, while not challenging, is just plain fun, and I enjoy engaging with it. In a way, this reminds me of the Leviathan Billikite fight from Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword, and that sums up this boss well. This is From Software making their own Zelda boss, and after multiple attempts like Storm King and Yorm, they finally nailed it with this beautiful Divine Dragon that has the best music in the game backing him up, while being just plain enjoyable to face off against, even if not challenging. And given that he's sandwiched between 2 of the game's super bosses, when you're going for the true ending, I think having a boss that focuses just on being fun is more than fine. It still maintains itself as one of my favorite dragon bosses, not only from Software games, but in video games in general. Number 3, Genichiro Ashina. Welcome to the boss that forces me to actually learn how to play the game. It's interesting how early Genichiro is, potentially being your 2nd Remembrance boss, and at the absolute latest being your 4th Remembrance boss, and that's only assuming you went out of your way to do Lady Butterfly and the Corrupted Monk early. but I think his fight acts as a satisfying rematch after he clapped your ass in the tutorial. There's a history between these two and a rivalry, albeit one-sided on our end, and it's presented in a way that gives the fight some personal stakes, which is something rarely seen in From Software games out of something like Iguazu from Armored Core 6. Genichiro is your test to see how well you've nailed down the deflect system, as there's no real cheese strats to employ, other than the door, but he has mix-ups he can perform, like ending with sweeps, thrusts, or pulling out the bow to snipe you. Overall, it's a great challenge to see if you're ready for the game's second act. But hang on just a moment, as Genichiro has a third phase. The first boss in the game with a third phase in fact, and one of only a couple to actually do so, as he sheds his armor to unleash the lightning of Tomoe, and now it's time to utilize your newly acquired lightning deflections while battling with a faster version of a foe you just got done facing. I love this boss fight, and it's by far my favorite required boss in the game, having much of the same cinematic flair as Divine Dragon, but a lot more going for it in terms of gameplay and narrative. Did I drag out the last phases of the fight an extra minute and take 4 additional deaths against him because I was determined to beat his ass by draining his health to 0 and refused to simply posture break him? Yes, most certainly. Do I regret it? Not one bit. Genichiro is the best required boss in Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, and I will die on this hill. The music, the visuals, the challenge, the story, and even the fun gimmick in the last phase bring it all together for me as one of the most enjoyable boss fights in a video game. Number 2, Demon of Hatred. I swear, it seems like I'm contractually obligated to have my number 2 slot be controversial. Anyway, let's talk about the Demon of Hatred, aka the Sculptor, aka the Orangutan, aka the closest we have to facing Shura, also known as Papa Bear from the Bearstein Bears. Look it up. Demon of Hatred is what happens when you take Lawrence the First Vicar but make him an actually good boss fight. The music here is intense and the fight is far more in line with the other From Software games, being more about dodging than deflections. And while some may hate that, I thankfully just got done replaying DS3 earlier this year, and I beat AI Limit recently, so it wasn't that crazy of an adjustment for me. And while his fire attacks may be very difficult to deal with at times, you might have the red gourd at this point, so Blaze isn't as bad, and the umbrella can actually stop a lot of his fire attacks. And he has some pretty generous telegraphs on his attacks, leaving plenty of opportunities to dodge and scoring a bit of damage. Story-wise, I also like that this boss is the corrupted form of the Sculptor, giving into his rage after seeing what the Interior Ministry did to the land he loved, and now you face off with this demon in the same arena where a man on a horse was happy to tell you his name hours ago. That being said, I'd never actually faced Demon of Hatred prior to this playthrough, and heard he was the hardest pre-Millennia boss fight in the FromSoft library, even surpassing Orphan of Kos. I don't know, man, I actually beat him on my 4th try. Actually, talking about that for a second, I've never really found the hardest bosses in From Software games to be that bad personally. Demon's Souls doesn't really have a super boss, DS1 doesn't seem to have a general consensus other than no parry win, but Fume Knight, Nameless King, Midir, Kos, Promised Consort Radon, and even Demon of Hatred have all been hyped up as these monstrous titans of difficulty in their respective games, and I just didn't struggle with them that much. This isn't me flexing, by the way. My first playthrough of DS3, the Dragon Slayer armor folded my ass like dirty laundry over 20 times, and I fought him after Nameless King, and in this playthrough of Sekiro, Corrupted Monk took me 15 attempts. I struggle in the weird spots, apparently. Either way, I know most people tend to despise Demon of Hatred on their first playthrough, and then only start warming up to him on their second or third, but I'm actually glad that I enjoyed this fight. I don't know. It's weird having a super boss that I like because that's kind of a mixed bag in most RPGs, to be honest.
That day, I pulled you from the battlefield, a starving cub. I had no idea what you'd become. Father, it breaks my heart. But I'm putting you down!
For those waiting to hear how I didn't struggle with Owl Father after I had an easy time with Ishin the Sword Saint and Demon of Hatred, no, this guy killed me over 40 times and was easily the hardest fight in the playthrough. But you know what? I enjoyed it. Each attempt I got just a little bit better at facing him and learning his attacks. The music here is excellent, the story is gripping, it's a battle with a character we've interacted with, and the action RPG Dance of Death is better here than in most other video games. He fights like no other opponent in the game, even his other battle now. He uses some shinobi techniques, but instead of dirty tricks, it's pure ingenuity, with his only real tool being his spirit owl and his firecrackers that he brought over because they're too good to let go. And hey, I'm using those too. Interestingly, he has the same skills you do, like critical strikes and Makiri counters, so it has the same vibe as Soul of Cinder does, where the boss is modified, but it's still kind of playing on your terms. And maybe that's why I love this fight so much. This fight eclipsed any other battle in the game for me difficulty-wise, but its enjoyment was unmatched, and with the amazing track backing it up, as well as a good story of hunting down the man who killed you initially and caused you to gain immortality only to learn that man was your own father, yeah, it stands out. But I have to ask, does killing him here not cause a time paradox since we also kill him in the present? Anyway, not important. Either way, Hellfather is a fantastic challenge for those looking to obtain my personal favorite ending in the game, and having to use everything at your disposal to come out on top makes it all the more special. I don't think it beats out Soul of Cinder or All Mine for me in terms of From Software bosses, but it's definitely chilling out there in my top 5, along with Scattered Tree Avatar and the Gaping Dragon. No, I will not elaborate on those two.
Defeated by my own son. The feeling is not entirely unpleasant.
And that does it for this video. Sekiro Shadows Die Twice is a challenging game. Until it isn't. But then it is again. Until it's not. But hey, I don't do difficulty rankings because those get kinda boring after a while. This game was fun to play through, and I enjoyed it far more than I did during my first playthrough over 5 years ago, so I'm really glad I gave it a second go around. I guess that goes to show how important second chances can be, and how given time you can genuinely get better without even knowing it. Overall, I had a great time, and can easily recommend this game to anyone that may still be on the fence about playing it if they somehow haven't played one of From Software's Game of the Year winners. That's all I have for this video. If you enjoyed this video, consider liking and subscribing. I've made boss rankings for other games, such as Dark Souls 3 and Kirby Forgotten Land, as well as videos covering some games in full. Consider checking them out. If you watch this far, that means you probably find my stuff decent enough as background noise. Anyways, that's all I've got for now. I hope you all enjoy your day, and I'll see you in the next video, whatever that may be.